Good afternoon, YouTube. This is LA Prepper here, and today we're going to be talking about trees and grass and little animals and space. Oh, look at these. What are these wires holding up? That's what I want to know. Are they holding up a tree? Are they holding up a telephone pole? Very curious. Some more wires. Like, could you avoid the wires in the photo, or you just could not avoid, or you're trying to show the wires? He might have been trying to show the wires so that if the person that buys it complains about these wires, the guy can say, look, I showed you a photo of the wires. Cables, whatever they are. They're definitely anchoring something. Probably a tree, looking at the way some of these trees are growing. This is going to be a VR to Huples. He recently... Nice plat map. I was talking with the plat map the other day with one of my buddies. So Huples made a video recently called Prepping and Sustainability. And his basic question in the video was, is trying to move towards a fully sustainable lifestyle an integral part of prepping, or is it something that's on the side? And I'll let you watch his video. It's a really good video. I definitely recommend it. I'm going to give you my take on it. I'll try to keep this to a modest length, under 10 minutes, maybe even under 5 minutes, but definitely I think under 10 minutes. Another, oh gosh, and I always do this, I always think about a video that I watched and I don't remember the person that made the video, but let me find it right now. It's about tears and shit hits the fan. That's funny, I'm searching for it in singular and I can't find it, and then plural and it comes right up. Steve Foco. Oh yeah, we gotta get this guy to 100. Sorry Steve, I gotta admit, I wanted to get you to 100 over the weekend, but got sidetracked with stuff because I remembered because you're at 95 right now. So that's Steve, I think it's Foco or Foso, it's Foco. Forgive me Steve if I'm totally butchering your last name and getting it wrong at any rate. Made a video about tears if shit hits the fan. So in response to Huples' question of is prepping and sustainable living, are they commingling? I'm going to say that in tier 3 and tier 2, not so much. For short to medium term disasters, even considering something like Hurricane Katrina, medium term, society comes back to normal within a number of months. Granted, some of those people, their lives never got to be the same. Maybe their insurance payout got messed, maybe they didn't get one, they lost all their valuables, maybe they lost their job, family members, trauma, but by and large, society in Louisiana didn't collapse into a black hole forever, right? So in tier 3 and tier 2, I think you can essentially, bug in for the most part. If you have to evacuate temporarily, perhaps you have to evacuate. Even the people in Ventura with the whole Thomas fire recently, it'd be really interesting. I'm not sure. I guess depending on how badly their home was damaged, there's probably people that are still waiting for their homes to be built. It does take a while for a crew to put up a house and design a house, and who knows. So I mean, if you had a bug out location and you were displaced from your home because of a fire for 4 months, would it be nice to have a bug out location? Yeah, it would. Is it essential? No. The alternative could be expensive, certainly. Motels or camping or even sleeping in your car can cost money to a certain extent, especially if you still have to pay the mortgage because you still own the land, you still own the house, even if it's a burning pile of whatever. I'm not sure your bank's going to give you mortgage forgiveness because half of it burnt down. Interesting thing to contact your bank about if you have any leeway during a natural disaster. At any rate, sustainability and prepping, and are they connected? Let's move to the tier 1 of shit hits the fan, according to Steve FOCO. I think if you're realistically trying to survive the very, very, very worst case scenario where you're basically looking at probably long-term things are crazy for whatever reason. But, not just your little city, not just your county, not even your state, but your sort of country at large, kind of descending into chaos. Is prepping just enough for that? Or do you have to be sustainable, or is sustainability part of prepping? I think sustainability has to be a part of prepping, and at the same time, I think a lot of preppers look at sustainability as something perhaps in the distant future, only because of how the simple fact that most preppers aren't living on a farm, they aren't living in the country, right? So I think if you took a poll of everyone who considers themselves a quote-unquote prepper, I think the majority don't live on an ideal piece of property at the moment. Most of them probably live in urban or suburban type areas. That's where most people live in general, right? So for people that, are living in rural areas, or maybe even on an ideal piece of land, sustainability is going to be part of your everyday life, probably just because people in the country tend to think a little more like that. Are there people in the country who waste and don't have any animals or vegetables or chickens and just, yeah, I'm sure there are. But I think there's a lot of people that live in the country that do try to live a somewhat more rural, traditional type lifestyle where they're not, using such an ungodly amount of artificial resources. They're not buying plastic bottles of water by the 24 case every week like it's a survival item. They're getting water, but they're not like, when I see people buying just all these little individual bottles, like, why do you have to buy all those bottles? I'm not a big environment freak, but just seems so unnecessary, right? But back to sustainability. So for all these people living in apartments and homes in the city like I do, now granted, apartments and houses are a bit different, but I think for most people living in the city, it would be, I'm not going to say impossible, but I'm going to say very, very challenging to be fully sustainable on a third of an acre, right? Or a quarter of an acre. Yes, you can have gardens. Yes, you can have some animals, even presuming that all the regs and laws are in your favor as far as chickens and, meat rabbits or whatnot. But even if, you go vertical and you have aqua this and you have fish and you do a whole bunch of stuff, besides the fact that it would be a major operation, because trying to do it in such a confined space means things tend to get a little more complicated. The chance of you becoming, fully sustainable in a quarter acre like that is, it would take a while. It would take several thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars of investment. And if not tens of thousands of dollars of investment, thousands and thousands of hours of labor. You can spend a couple weekends and get a little garden going, but to where you're living off a garden, that's many, 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 many hours of work, right? And time, not just work. You can't just put in all the work in a weekend. I mean, it's time of the soil becoming healthy, the plants becoming healthy. You don't always get, a crop the first few weeks or the first cycle of the plant, right? Not to get off track, but sustainability is not something you can kind of buy, obviously. It's not something you can do overnight unless you buy a homestead that's already actively homesteading, which is possible, but very rare, so I'm not really going to talk about that like a possible solution. So back to the sustainability idea. If if you're looking to only prepare for, let me do a quick time check here. Okay, we're coming on like 8 minutes. If you're only looking to prepare for the majority of bad stuff that's going to happen, you know, the probability of something very, very long term or indefinite length happening is very, very low, right? Who knows what it is, but you know, 0.00, however many zeros you think percent. So you could say, I'm going to be a prepper and think about 99.999% of, you know, the likely stuff to happen depending on, you know, your value. Maybe you think it's 90%. Maybe you think there's a 9 out of 10 chance it's not going to be the end of the world forever. Who knows? You can plan for that part and forget about the I have to be ready for Mad Max forever, and kind of separate that sustainable part. Because as long as it's not very, very long term, you don't really care about sustainability. If it's for a few weeks or a few months or even a year, you know, would it be nice to be sustainable for that year? Yeah, but theoretically you could survive a year off your preps. If you got 5 years of preps and society is crazy for a year and month 13 things get back to normal, quote unquote, you don't need to worry about sustainability if you have several years of supplies. So there's that. I think if you want to say, I want to prep for absolutely every possible scenario with, of course, the less likely but very long-term situations, you know, doomsday apocalypse, you know, a complete societal collapse, asteroid, who knows, aliens invading, something that affects the whole world and everything becomes, you know, majorly different. Sustainability is really going to be the only way to survive. Unless, you know, nobody's going to have like 50 years of supplies, right? Unless you're 80 years old and you have 20 years of supplies and you figure, well, if I get to be 100 and I run out of spam, then who cares, you know? Unless that's you, you're not going to have enough preps to last you forever. So you kind of have to be sustainable if you're planning on preparing for the indefinite amount of time disaster. Not everyone necessarily is. Being, you know, looking at the weighted average, being the slightly less likely scenario, it obviously makes a lot more sense to prepare for the here and now, earthquakes, power outages, things like that, rather than, you know, Mount St. Helens erupting. Although volcanoes, you know, have erupted. We have seen volcanic activity. We have seen earthquakes around the Ring of Fire recently. So to keep this video short, I think you can absolutely call yourself a prepper and spend the majority of your prepping time not being sustainable, mostly because in my opinion anyways, the likelihood of things being crazy forever is relatively low. So it's probably a lot easier, even if you were going to say, okay, I'm going to set my minimum at 5 years. 5 years of supplies, right? I don't even know if that's feasible, food, medicine, and all that stuff. I know it's technically feasible, but I mean, you're going to have a container and spend thousands and thousands of dollars or some amount of money. I don't know. I'd love to know what you think $5,000 or five years of food would cost, just out of curiosity. Maybe it's not as much as I would think. Maybe it's like 20 or 30 grand or something, or maybe less. Anyways, I was going to look it up, but I'll let you give me some links on that. So you don't have to be going that sustainable life. And in some respects, because it's somewhat less likely that things are going to be crazy forever, you almost don't want to prioritize I have to have everything off grid and composting my poop and filtering water from the creek and growing all my vegetables, and I never shop at the store, and you know, I make my own thread out of flax and I make my own cloth on a loom, and you know, who knows, right? You don't have to get to that super 100% off-grid homesteader. Could it be a valuable part of your preps in general? Yeah, I think so, because even in a short-term event, you're still potentially going to benefit from what you have set up, you know, Having fresh vegetables is always going to be a benefit, even if the power is on. Having some solar backup is always going to be a benefit, even if it just helps you pay a lower power bill. That's something that's nice on top of being ready for being able to charge your phone if a storm blows the power out, if you're, say, on-grid power, right? So I think sustainability has, I think one of the reasons I prep personally is that we're not living sustainably. We are relying on the fact that we can use a very gross amount of resource to ship stuff all over the planet. All this oil and not just fossil fuels, but metals and fish and animals and all the stuff that we're taking from the environment, right? Where human population is going up exponentially. The amount of stuff that we're taking from the environment is going up exponentially, and we're not putting stuff back exponentially. If we were putting back all the oil that we were taking, it wouldn't be a big deal. Now, in some areas, they're planting the trees that we're taking. In some areas, they're growing as many animals as we're taking. But, in general, we're kind of raping and pillaging the planet and doing a little bit to make it better, but our net effect, we're damaging it this much and doing this much to fix it. So we're not, or maybe, huge amount of damage and a tiny amount of trying to make it better. Whatever it is, it's not going in a good direction. So in general, I think society is not sustainable. So if you don't want to prep, if you don't want to put sustainability like in a high priority for your preps, I think that's actually legitimate for the majority of circumstances. I think in a large majority of things going bad, not being sustainable, if you have a lot of preps, you could be fine. But definitely if things go on long term, that sustainability it's going to be vital. Unless you want to have 20 or 30 or 40 or some ungodly amount of food stored. And even if you did, the ability of you to defend it or to take it with you, it's just going to be tough. It's going to be tough. It's a really fascinating subject, and I don't think necessarily any one group has the how to survive the apocalypse figured out. I don't think necessarily the bushcraft people are going to be coming out on top, or the survivalists, or the preppers, or the sustainable people, or the bug-ins, or the bug-outs. I think it's really going to come down mostly to, what happens in our local environment. Granted, it's going to come down to the individual, but it's just, it's just hard to tell, kind of. It's hard to tell. So many variables. Such a fascinating potential future. And with things heating up locally, regionally, and globally, 2018 is coming to be an interesting year. So let me know what you think about sustainability and prepping. Are they connected? Are they the same? Do you have to do both? Can you focus on one and not the other? And what might the ramifications be of choosing the wrong priority? Until then, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time.